Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Today we continue the chronicles of the notorious outlaw Alec "Deadeye" Baldwin, the fastest gun in Beverly Hills. As predicted, that DA out there is slowly burying the case and quietly closing everything down. They telegraphed what their intentions were when they allowed the former assistant director on the movie, Dave Halls, to have a plea deal where he was allowed to get a suspended sentence with only 6 months probation. And that's the frame for what they want to do here with Baldwin. The decision has already been made. The white media is not covering this story. They're merely playing their part and explaining to the public why nothing's going to be done about this crime. The DA refused to even arrest Baldwin, and if he has a mugshot, which wouldn't be his first, by the way, they haven't made it public even today. They can't lie and claim that they treat all defendants like this. They can't claim that, well, Alec Baldwin's not being treated differently from any other defendant. Of course he is. Notice that? See the level of lies and the lengths they have to go to in order to try to keep scrutiny away from this. He's being treated completely differently than any defendant you ever heard of. About the only charges left now are just 2 measly charges of involuntary manslaughter, which, even if Baldwin were to be convicted, only carries an 18-month sentence. And the DA has already said that basically they're going to be letting a jury decide which one to go with, but we all know it's not going to get that far because it's not supposed to. And Alec Baldwin's not the only one getting the velvet glove treatment. The DA is also doing the same for the armorer. You know, she's the woman who was blamed for having had live rounds in the gun in the first place. So just as we see with the thugs in blue, we're not hearing about what law should apply to this particular incident. Instead, the white media is only telling us how allegedly difficult it is to get a conviction. That is, if they report on this at all. Gee, Alec Baldwin killed someone, and yet he's being treated better than Jussie Smollett. Alec Baldwin is a movie star, while Jussie Smollett was a D-list nobody supporting character on a TV show. Though look at how totally differently these cases are being handled. Look at the lengths they're going to protect Alec Baldwin, but of course we know they're not really protecting Baldwin at all. But we know that this isn't about race because the white media says so. The authorities seem to understand full well that this is all for show, and the white media certainly seems to be in on the joke. And you know who else is too? Hollywood. Well, if nothing else, at least the movie Rust has been canceled, right? I mean, what with someone having been killed, and the star of the movie having been charged, and the huge scandal it's become, everyone associated with that movie is now looking for a new gig because the film is toast and... oh, wait. Yeah, the scene of the crime will soon resume shooting, no pun intended. Apparently, the people behind this movie see the media attention they've gotten as free PR. I guess for them, the only bad publicity is none at all. They don't seem to have had much problem at all being able to attract new people to come on board the production and work for them. Oh, they're bringing people in. This is not a matter of can we hold on to who we got. It's a matter of, oh, we're bringing in new folks. And as for Alec Baldwin's involvement with the movie now, according to the Hollywood Reporter, Baldwin still has scenes that need to be filmed, but a lawyer representing the production company declined to comment on Baldwin's current legal troubles and whether or not that will impact filming. You get that? They're not saying that, oh, we definitely have to recast, you know, like that movie All the Money in the World did when Kevin Spacey got into trouble a few years back. Instead, what the lawyer for the production company is saying is they can't comment on what they'll do. So that means they're trying to hold on to Alec Baldwin, even after all of this. So just to recap, Jussie Smollett is accused of filing a false police report, and that becomes the crime of the century in Chicago, and the white media goes into a phony feeding frenzy, and his career is over. No one was hurt, except for maybe the feelings of those 2 Nigerians who were allegedly involved. Yet the white authorities, from the police to the judges, demanded that there be a trial. They were like, we're going to trial with this, because it rises to that level, right? Does it rise to that level for all the white people who make false police reports against black people? Of course not. It wasn't about Jussie Smollett. It was about race. And they did all that for what was literally a non-event, wasting several months and God knows how many millions of dollars for a nothing burger. Meanwhile, Alec Bullseye Baldwin shoots and kills someone. He doesn't get arrested, he merely gets charged, and those are now predictably being downgraded on the way to what will surely be a plea deal, like all the other crimes Baldwin's committed, which I detailed for you in a previous crime report on this very YouTube channel. And now not only is he not going to be losing any acting gigs, he hasn't even lost his job on the very movie that he killed someone on. The white media is not reminding everyone of what a jerk Alec Baldwin is either. They're not trying to make him unsympathetic. They're not reminding people how he treated his former wife Kim Basinger, and even his own daughter. There's no reminder of all the other crimes he's committed since the mid-90s, and all the other times that he's been arrested and charged, and let go time after time. No attempts being made to tell the public that this was the inevitable result of a man with too much power and privilege, and he's been allowed to get away with it until it finally came to this. They don't dare frame this story as what the prosecution ought to be doing to get a conviction. No one in the white media is casting aspersions on the DA for reducing the charges, for dropping the charges, reporting on them as being incompetent or soft on crime, or bringing on legal experts to say, well, this is what they ought to be doing. They don't need to be dropping the charges. They got a case. They're not saying that, well, the voters in that area are going to be upset if Baldwin doesn't go to prison. They're not doing that. They're not building that kind of narrative. They're not bringing out every Hollywood star, writer, actor, or director who ever worked with Baldwin and putting them on the hot seat, throwing a microphone in front of their faces and saying, do you condemn Alec Baldwin? Surely you must feel some kind of way about this. They're not doing that. Lifetime's not putting out any surviving Alec Baldwin specials, which in his case the title would actually make sense. And there's nobody talking about streaming services or any of these movie studios removing Alec Baldwin's name from any of their projects, from any of their video library. Nobody talking about removing any movie that has his name attached to it. None of the phony outrage that we always see directed at black actors and celebrities, where the white media pushes a narrative that if a black person's accused of something, why, everyone just can't wait to remove anything with their names attached to it because they're just too radioactive. Everyone just wants to forget that this black person over here ever existed. People have been conditioned to expect that, but only if it's a black celebrity that's being talked about. All of this blatant white media censorship that's happening right now isn't because the white media likes Alec Baldwin. It's happening because the white media deals in racial narratives, and since their narratives form the backbone of the propaganda they use to manipulate society, the narratives have to be protected. There's no question Alec Baldwin committed the crime, and there's no question he has a long-standing criminal record, but he's not black. And for the white media, that means this has to be framed as an unintentional tragedy, but certainly not a crime, and definitely not deserving of any punishment. The white media is making it clear exactly what they want the public to think about this. Alec Baldwin isn't guilty because they need him not to be. They can't have a face his color being shown as the face of crime, so we get a sympathetic portrayal of the killer, and the prosecution receives no scrutiny for clearly putting on a show of their own. This has to be buried, just like Helena Hutchins. Or haven't you noticed that the white media doesn't mention her name? That's the woman who Alec Baldwin killed. But the white media isn't reminding you about her name. They're not talking with the family. They're not showing you her face either. This is a form of erasure. Helena Hutchins has to be made into a non-person. Saying the victim's name, showing her face, that would make her real to the public. And the more the public knows about her, the more aware that they are that this was a human being who was killed. This is how they depersonify the victim. The public has nothing to remind them that a person was killed. They don't have a face, they don't have a name. The white media is ignoring her, and that sends the clear message that she must not be worth mentioning at all, and what happened to her couldn't have been that important. Part of sanitizing the death that Alec Baldwin caused is to make sure not to remind the public too much about the person who died. Give as few details as possible. Be as vague as possible. No face, not even a name. Because then the subject becomes just an academic exercise. It's not about punishment. They don't want that. They need this to be a strictly legal exercise and not a question of justice. What comes next, of course, will be the rehabilitation of Alec Baldwin's image, not that he's taken much of a hit. They did it for Mel Gibson, they did it for Liam Neeson, and they'll do it for Alec too. Don't be surprised if and when you see some public show of support for him by the demented denizens of Tinseltown. If the degenerates in Hollywood are willing to give an Oscar to Roman Polanski and even have Harrison Ford hand-deliver it to him, this after this guy raped and sodomized a teenage girl, if they're willing to do that, they'll stoop to anything. Oh, and by the way, speaking of Roman Polanski, apparently that's the kind of character that Alec Baldwin likes to pal around with. He certainly has good taste in friends, doesn't he? But when Alec Baldwin does go back to making movies, not that he's really stopped, nobody's going to throw this in his face. None of this is going to be thrown in his face. Nobody will be reminded of any of this, the same way you hadn't heard about it until I just reminded you of it now. Neither the Oscars nor the Golden Globes, not even Saturday Night Live or even South Park or anybody else is going to do any skits bringing this up. This will be treated as if it hadn't happened. They're all just going to pretend as if the only shooting that ever went on an Alec Baldwin set was from the camera. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Noel Williams, Chris Bennett Sr., O and M.E. Family Tree, Mark Stroud, and Salim Mohammed. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.